All right, let's get this underway. Thank you guys for, everybody for showing up. The agenda that we have, we'll get to that in a minute, but we have some minutes that we needed to approve from our last meeting, which was last year. I hope everybody got a copy of that. Yes, indeed. Okay, do I hear a motion to approve those minutes? Moved. Thank you. Second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mark. All right. So let's move on to the agenda, and it's going to focus primarily on the, pardon me? Four.
What you just moved.
All in favor? All in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carried. Okay, agenda. We're going to talk about the sewer grant. Before we really dig into that, I just had another question just to reiterate, or to open for discussion if we need to. Do we really want to move forward with the sewer?
The questions I have, how much is it really gonna cost and how did we determine that cost?
The original, memory serves, the original was done quite a few years ago, 5 years ago.
2017.
2017 by a professional engineering firm. And I believe that cost for the option that looked most favorable was about 4.3 million.
I don't have it with me.
It was close to.
It was close to 5, but I'm quite sure that's not valid any longer.
Yeah, so it was in the fours, so let's call it somewhere around 4.5 or 4.6. And then there was, I think, didn't you contact them?
Yeah, I talked to
Ballpark.
Jerry, that owns EMI, and he figured, as best of my memory, and I didn't go back and look at my notes, it'd be, in today's dollars, it's probably 7.5 million.
And we have a drawing showing where the sewer line would
Yes.
be.
I will send, I have,
Right here.
and I have I think a digital copy, Martin, that I can send you.
Okay.
If not, I guess I could make you a copy. It's very thorough. It shows where it's going to go and what the options are. If that was one of the options, I think there was a package treatment plant. There was, I can't remember that you mentioned.
There was a lift station over behind where
Behind
the
the lodge.
lodge is, and then the pressurized system would kind of run up Ridgepole, if I'm not mistaken, come up there and go back down the Crusher Run area and tie into Reagan County.
But to answer your question originally, I wonder whether we can actually avoid it. And, health department rules have changed since Sky Valley was developed. You need more land for a drain field and so on and so forth. I don't know that we can actually address the question without getting their input. They may require it.
I am surprised they haven't already come. And Mark, what it is designed to do is all the commercial properties. That's all the timeshares and all the condos and the club and the main lodge and the timeshare building. And it would all gravity feed to the collection point behind the old lodge. And then a forced main going up Ridgepole to Evergreen, and then it's gravity going down the rest of the way. It would follow the route that we just paved.
So the question is, if any development happens in around the old lodge there, could we even get permits for septic based on what you were saying? That's a question.
It's a question.
The other question is, and it kind of goes to one of my follow-up questions, is, other than getting some new development going down there, like, multifamily, like condos or single-family homes, what are the other benefits and challenges that are problems that we have to solve right now, even if we don't do that development.
Well, don't we have some failing septic systems? Isn't,
I think some of the timeshare systems are failing.
yes.
And the Valley View one
Valley
is
View.
just, they just barely keep it going.
And it does have problems, yes.
So with those two, redoing septic probably isn't feasible, is that what I'm hearing?
I'm thinking not.
No. Long range, we've got to have sewer.
Yeah.
It's just, if nothing else, those items, I don't know that the time would ever come where we would want to tile, make everybody in a house. It'd be probably cost prohibitive.
I don't think you
That
would.
would
But,
happen.
but the question I've been noodling this over is that, okay, we can get 3 million here, then we've got to raise another 4 million. Some of that would have to come from the people that are gonna have to tie into it. And I say, they're going to have to tie in.
Some form of impact fees.
Yeah, and so are they prepared, does Valley View have some money somewhere? Let's say it costs $1,000 a unit to tie in, they've got, what, 40, how many units is Valley View? 40, 36, 40. So, then you've got all the other condos, and then I don't think the timeshares have any money, as we know, they just barely were able to make their water payments, electric payments. So, let's say that they would be good for raising another $1 million by everybody tying into it. I don't think we can even do that. If it's $1,000, we can charge them $1,000 a unit to tie in, that's $36,000. And that's the largest, and the same way with the timeshares.
And it depends on what Harrison Mayoral is going to do with his core property, which is the old lodge is part of, and that whole area.
I just think we need to say to Harrison, we're about to lose this $3 million, do you want to play? And if he says no, I think then we have to say, kick the can down the road and let the next generation deal with it. Because the biggest thing I hear constantly, especially from the old timers, is we're not going to incur any debt for this thing.
Well,
But those systems
Old-timers
that are
in every
failing
community
have
say the
to,
same
we have to
thing.
do something with them, right? The systems that are failing now,
Their personal ones, or the,
timeshares and,
Yeah.
yeah,
mhm.
yeah.
yeah, that's,
And
Well,
so
that's, if we kick the can down the road and their systems fail, and they can't get permits for a new septic system, you've automatically bankrupted them.
And we have a ghost town part of
Uh-huh.
it.
And what good does that do the city?
Yeah.
doesn't,
Jason, are there any other grants out there that we can get to help us?
If you want to.
Probably the best thing to do, talk about this grant, kind of just run a little history of it. The $3 million grant, when we used the study from 2017, and I spoke with Mr. Hood, at the time he said it was probably 6 million, so you can spend the 7. The 7.5 would probably be realistic, but when we did the proposal, there were, from speaking with GMRC, some potential loans that we could apply for. Again, the thought has been, the pushback has been, we don't want to incur any debt for this. There were some potential grants that were matching grants. Again, that puts skin in the game. This $3 million is a free and clear $3 million if we provide the deliverables. So to answer your question, the long about way is that we explored other options, but this is the only free and clear money. At that time, we were moving this forward, that didn't require taking on debt or doing any kind of matches.
Jason, is the 3 million, what's the timeline of validity on that?
Fortunately, we have, we're running out of time. It's still viable. I've had some conversations with some people that are involved in the decision-making process of this. Their graciousness has given us time, but it's the last conversation that I had with the chief of folks, which would have been late last year, early this year, was you need to get this going. We can give you a little bit of leeway, but if you're not going to do it, we need to know. And this is not, let's reapply next year. This was a one-time thing. It's my understanding the state had earmarked some money for these type of programs for that particular budget year, and this ties back to that budget year, I guess it's been 21. And so it is a golden opportunity, for lack of a better word, that if we let it go to the wayside, it's gone.
Jason, does collecting that grant money require a completed system? Or could we, for example, build the lift station and wait for the rest of it?
I would, without having to go back, I would say that the safe answer would be yes, because the intent of the grant is to solve a problem or perform an action, and obviously the action would be to have a online system. So I'd have to go back and look for the no, but the short answer would be yes. That the intent is that this money is to bring sewer to fruition.
But if I remember right, I think as work is done, we apply for distribution. Not the one
It's
$3 million
almost like
one
draws,
shot.
yes, but there's certain deliverables you have to meet. But we certainly don't want to put ourselves in a situation where we have to pay it back, if we have a half-built system. So that would be a caution right there as well. But yeah, there are deliverables that we have to meet as we meet, almost like you build a house or something, a contractor gets draws. Once you get to this point, you're eligible for this much money, this point, you're eligible for this much money. It's not, they don't just cut you a check for $3 million and say, here, go build a sewer.
Well, I would expect that, but yeah, could we build a lift station and get that draw of $3 million? And then it cost us 3. Well, that's a start.
Now, I did get a verbal commitment from Darren Giles that they would run the pipe to the city limits, and from the city limits down to the facility.
Well, that's a huge concession,
Yeah.
because at one point, we didn't think that was going to happen.
That was just a verbal agreement, and I have not asked him if he passed that by the commissioners, but
If we're serious about this, we'll need to get that in writing. Because he also promised to help with some of that back entrance that we did.
they, like everybody else, I talked to Scott Crowlands about it, and they've been very short of people.
Right. So probably good reason.
Yeah, I think timing was a big issue there.
Probably, yeah.
Well, I sure don't want us to lose this, and I know y'all don't need to lose that $3 million grant, because it'll never come back our way again.
Yeah, so it seems like what we're hearing here is there is a necessity to do this, sans the other new development that Mayoral is proposing. That we need to get something done for that valley area there.
I think so. And, maybe getting some input from the health department would be appropriate.
Yeah,
And see where they stand on that.
yeah, that is one step that I noted here, to get some input from them. The other thing was probably need to tighten up the cost overall of that proposal. Engineer, we may need to spend a little money engage an engineering firm to do that.
Did that original proposal include going all the way down to Reagan Gap?
Yes.
So that would take some of that out of there.
But I think everybody pretty much figures the expense in running the forced main along Ridgepole down Evergreen is gonna run into problems because there's apparently a lot of rock. And that's gonna be on our nickel, because it's still in the city limits. It's got that, they're just gonna run it down, pressure running along Kelly Street. But, it also gives.
Well, that's why we have.
Significant drop in elevation too.
And what,
A significant drop in elevation too.
which would mean what, Jason?
The solids out, the liquids out from the solids.
Okay.
Well, what do you call, there's devices built into the system along there.
To slow it down.
Yeah. We're reducing valves, things like we have with our.
Oh, okay, gotcha,
Yeah.
gotcha.
The question would be, okay, we do take on some debt. You borrowed $1 million, so what are our current revenue from all taxes, $1,970,000 or something like that?
You talking about the general fund?
Yeah, well, yeah, how much tax money did we take in?
$1,000,001.
$1 million. And that's just a drop in the bucket, is what we'd have to raise.
Yeah,
Well, you were talking about a loan too.
Yeah.
Well, and you're talking $1 million. From what I'm hearing here, that the $3 million would probably cover half of it.
probably phase one maybe.
Yeah. So, you're looking at another, $3 million in debt.
Well, part of our enterprise fund loans there's no interest on some of our loans, correct?
We have two loans. One is interest free and one is interest.
Which is something.
The other
What are
interest
those
is
loans covering now?
water
Water.
system.
Water system upgrades from several years ago.
Yeah,
Those mature, what, 2030,
Yeah.
2032?
We're about to, we're probably 60% of the life of those loans. Maybe a little more.
You know, the other interesting thing is, if we look at the debt we have now, I think it's, what our auditors say, about 11%,
yes.
which is very, very low
Very low.
for a
Municipality. yeah.
municipality.
Mhm.
So there's potentially room for a little bit of additional debt. The other question is, or the other thing is, what's been brought up is bonds. Can we raise money through that? I've never done it, not sure how that exactly works.
I mean, there's several ways this could be structured. I know one of the previous conversations we had with the Mayorals, there was discussion about trying to either, if they put up money, they would recoup through, they would buy so many tap fees or something. There's numerous ways you could structure this deal. There are ways you could sell that debt through a bond or something. Most of my career being a land use planner, I know I've always been an advocate that development should pay for itself. I see this as a great opportunity for Maryland. I mean, here we are, we're willing to, we have skin to bring into the game, per se. I know we've been kind of waiting on that feasibility study that they're supposed to be doing.
A company came and presented to Jason and I don't remember who else, a couple of years ago, and it was a self-contained system, and it was quite a bit cheaper. Is there any way we can do a self-contained system?
I've asked Jerry, what's his?
Show? No, Jerry, no, Hood.
Jerry Hood,
Mhm.
that question, he said EPD, with all the capacity the Rankin County plan has got, they're not about to let you do that.
The other challenge was that the water from that would have to be sprinkled on the golf course.
That was one of the possibilities,
One of
yes.
the possibilities.
Although
yeah.
this company,
Deep
said that,
injection well wouldn't work?
I don't know, this company said that, you could drink the water after they treated it. Is there anything else that the Water and Sewer Authority could help us do to make this come to fruition, besides putting in the pipe from the city limits down to them? I don't know if they can find grants for us, or, because eventually they of course will get who gets the tap-on fees then? The Water and Sewer Authority?
Well, that's probably to be determined. I would think we want to get the tap-on fees and just
But
pay.
they would get the processing fee on it.
Yeah, they'll get to fix whatever the,
Right.
somewhat the flow that they're processing, how many gallons, and then they would bill us back. I guess we would have to collect that after
Okay.
a month of fee.
Well, I talked to Harrison Mayoral last week.
Which one?
Junior was running the operation. Yeah, senior's still chairman of the board there. And, I asked him, were there any changes to his ideas for what he wanted to do here in Sky Valley? And no real changes based on the last meeting we had with him, where we convinced him that skiing was not going to happen, and that we wanted to maintain the residential feel for what's in the valley here. And so, he had his professional planner there from Atlanta as well.
And you did talk about a commercial
A
area.
little bit of a commercial area around the old lodge, which might have some convenience, could have, a coffee shop type of operation, what they call the horizontal hotel, which would almost be like cabins or condos that would, be nightly rent, et cetera, which might be a good alternative to the timeshare for the club, et cetera, and for other visitors. And that the commercial piece, the real commercial piece, so he's talking about that area where Covered Bridge is and
On 246, yeah.
on 246 to put a more commercialized area down there, which would probably be a better place for him too, given the traffic on 246. There's still, that's what they're still talking about. And all of that's been on hold until the sewer issue is solved. If we commit, I think in our last conversation, if we commit to at least phase one of the sewer and get started, then they want to do a full feasibility study and all that, which I'm sure they're gonna need for the banks to finance what they're doing.
This plan we've got here wouldn't cover the covered bridge area at all, would it?
No,
No,
Wouldn't think.
and that was the other comment he made last week, that they have to check out what kind of sewer capacity, or septic capacity they could get there,
Right.
if any.
Yep.
So, again, it's kind of between a rock and a hard place here, because they're not gonna invest any real money, or any money, until we commit to that sewer. And the second thing is, what they can do or willing to do is gonna be based on their feasibility studies.
What I propose that we do is spend some money with the EMI and ask them to give us a serious update of the plan that they've got, so that we know for the next 24 months, what would it cost us to do it?
I would agree. I've got 4 next steps here that I'm hearing. That's one of them. Another one is getting some, real good information from the health department about septic and what we can and can't do. And looking at all the alternatives to the sewer that might solve our problems that we have now. And then the alternative funding, what are the options out there? Merrill's were very firm on they're gonna build, if they do, when they develop the condos and or single family, and anything else that happens in the valley, they're gonna build into the cost of that, you know, the tie-ins. That's how they would participate in this thing. What they didn't wanna do was front the money up. They wanna pay it as they go.
Sure.
But don't we need to know their plans in order for us to come up with
It's a
a?
catch-22.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Exactly, that's why this hasn't moved forward
all right.
Right.
in 3 years.
And what was with the GFA folks, Jason, what was the engineering things that we had to accomplish in order to start this process?
We had to basically put out a proposal defining the scope of the work, which we did, and we received 2 proposals. Of course, obviously they're void now because of the time.
Right,
And there were some costs. I have those. Any numbers would be irrelevant even next year just because it's been so long ago. But a lot of it was their fees. I mean, but their fees were several $100,000 just in the fees themselves. Then there was other things that they estimated the cost that were consistent
Right.
with this study. But
yeah, we received the grant in August of 2021, so yeah, we've been holding on to it for quite a while.
that there would be a tremendous amount of legwork from staff, and of course that's what we're to do that, and a tremendous commitment up front, even moving forward. I do remember Mr. Hood saying that initially we probably would be looking at, I want to say $25,000 to $50,000 just in upfront expenses for various things to move this forward. So I don't know if they would charge, do any kind of updates, that might be dependent or part of that, but really the next thing I need to probably do is have another conversation with GFA and just say, hey, we're still, don't give up on us yet. They haven't been calling me, but again, not to relate what I just said, a few minutes ago, the last conversation was, we need to know something. So that's kind of where we're at.
Would it help to tell them our dilemma?
I've explained to them.
They don't have any other money in the
Their
pocket.
position is that these are things that you're expected to work out as part of the process, so, yeah, it's, and I do think explaining the dilemma is what has given us the graciousness of more time, because from, as I recall, this was about a 4-year process. Initially, when we began, we were going through the steps. Here we are almost 2 years ago. We should be theoretically almost halfway through, meaning that there should be brick and mortar buildings and pipes in the ground at some stage by this time. So we would significantly be trying to play catch up, which, I mean, I felt like we could do it, but in my position, I think I would be remiss if I said we look at taking debt as our last resort. Just
I'd say they've been very kind, because in the original grant, it states that the grantee will have 6 months to execute grant agreements, so we have not done that. And there's a bunch of them.
How much debt did we take on for the water system? Do you remember? What is the value of those 2 loans?
I'd have to pull that back.
Is under $1 million?
Oh, it was more than that.
No more than that.
It was, we pay back approximately $10,000 a month, on our service on that debt. One's around, there's several ones around 5,500, one's around 4,500. And we've got probably 7, 8 years left on that. I have to pull the amortization. I can get you that information, but I don't have it on top of my head. from my recollection from these meetings, and I'm on the outside looking in, but being there, the things that I kept hearing him say as far as having to have a winter draw, will there be any consideration of any acceptable level of something to do with snow? And I'm not advocating for it. My 51-year-old knees won't be out there on ski slopes, but I mean, from the revenue standpoint, and from the moving things forward standpoint, you know, if our water system can't support it, well, he has to help, he has to improve our water system. If the roads, he'll have to put a new interest in them, and development pays for itself. Is that something that,
Yeah, I
to
think
get through some of that impasse to try to move this forward? I think that's kind of been the thing that's been unspoken, or once he brings that up, it kind of comes to a roadblock there, to say it nicely.
well, he's not gonna do anything, whether it's snow or anything until the sewer is. Because he doesn't make money off of the scheme. Whoever the operator is going to make the money off the scheme. And you know, we can get taxes as a city. But also, you know, going back before and really significant input from David Spears, who owned it at one point, said the only one who made money was him on the scheme. The city had to spend more money.
Sure, for
Because,
infrastructure,
well, it was,
services, yeah.
it was services, more police.
Garbage.
Garbage, because the majority of the skiers are day trippers.
Mhm.
You know, which is great exposure, but, you know.
But they're not the type that would come up to Sky Valley and buy a house.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So, and you get 500 to 1,000 people on the weekend up here, you know, doing that. And I mean, I don't know what y'all think, but I think that just kind of destroys the residential golf resort feeling that we have here. And that's that, and the surveys that we put out to the citizens kind of reinforce that, and all the other conversations.
They didn't like the light, the noise, the people, the
Well,
garbage.
and then you got the other, then they've got another infrastructure problem. That pond over in front of the post office there, and the compressors that pumped water and made the snow up the mountain there, all that water came out of that pond, which doesn't exist anymore. So, you know, and they own that. Whether or not they could get a permit, since it's a primary trout tributary, to dredge it. I mean, there's just all kinds of hurdles with the skiing, and it took 2 years to get them to the point where they thought that they could do something that without that.
I was just mentioning the winter draw,
Yeah.
being that, I guess they were trying, from their feasibility, they were trying to figure out what might be something that could attract people here. I know that when we talk about hotels and things like that, I will say this. I did, back when this was going on 2 years ago, I did have some conversation with some of the state economic development folks. And Raven County, because of the poverty threshold, you take away the Lake Sky Valley, we're really not a very wealthy county, and there may be some incentives that we might qualify. Particularly, we're talking about a situation where you have job creation. So I don't know if Merrill's aware of that.
Yeah,
but,
and we talked about that. That would have been part of the feasibility to also do economic impact, which would probably make some eligibility for some other development money or infrastructure money. The question, the big question is, do we want that, does the citizenry of Sky Valley want that in the middle of that valley? And if that's the consensus, I mean, certainly, you know, consider it, but so far, that's not been the consensus.
No. What I hear from everybody is they want modern, condos with garages and possible small commercial area. That's what I hear.
Conveniences.
And some conveniences, yeah. That's what I hear.
That would certainly require sewer. I mean,
Yeah.
when you talk about septic system, I would imagine Mr. Reese would probably say, I need to see plans to let you know that just being around development 20+ years, your density, which is what they're looking for, that return, I've seen multifamily done, aka condominiums on septic, and where they're looking to get 8, 10, and 12 units per acre, you're getting 2, 3, sometimes 4 if it's good soil. So it's certainly going to impact what they're wanting to do.
And
Another thought is, when we talk about the dreaded D word debt, I know there was a conversation about impact fees. There's a gentleman by the name of Bill Ross, who is probably the guru of impact fees. He's, in the state of Georgia, he is the definitive expert. He's written impact fee ordinances for cities and counties, and probably knows more than the state does about it. I mean, I would be glad to reach out to him if that's something we wanted to discuss, about trying to find some creative ways to pay back debt, or structure something in a way where it's not directly impacting the property owner, particularly those who would not benefit from it. So I know that, as you all know, I'm sure you got phone calls on this thing. We never formally announced this grant, we're not hiding it, it was just something, there was just so many unknowns, and we got it so quickly. But we did receive a lot of calls from people who were very adamant that we would not do that. But with that being said, I'm sure there's tons of creative ways to do this. It's just, I would have to defer that to experts. It's just not something that probably like many of us have been involved in, but those are options. I'll just leave it at that.
I would like to see that, Jason, if you can get that going, because I don't see a way that we cannot do this,
I don't even.
really.
is that the consensus here?
I guess I'm
Is
listening.
that a consensus with you? That there's no way we cannot do this?
There's no question we need more information.
Yeah,
The health department, EPD,
right.
both. But knowing what we know about septic and so forth, I just don't see that they're ever gonna allow timeshares, Valley View, the other condominiums that are up there on the hill behind the
And
post office and so
future
forth.
building.
Any future building, there's just not the land here to support it.
It was the athletic cost prohibitive.
Yeah.
On septic.
And I think that we owe it to the future of Sky Valley to have sewer,
Absolutely.
period.
Yeah.
I guess, and I think we do need to take and put the word debt out on the table, and we need to be honest with ourselves. We probably can't do it without putting some more of our own skin in the game as you use it. So, if you borrow $2 million, I don't know what the amortization of that would be over 20 years. What would that add to the debt burden of the city of Sky Valley? Is it gonna add enough that we're gonna have to raise the taxes? Probably. But then again, their country clubs are good at having special assessments when they need to do something. And like we've been able to avoid that at the Sky Valley Country Club.
And also, we've got development starting to really increase, and I see we are going to be receiving more tax money. I really do, I see that coming.
That's the whole purpose of
Right,
long term
right.
of getting some, more, businesses and or housing there to improve the tax.
I'm just saying, yeah, right, in the city period, we're getting.
Bill, I think another one of your next steps, if it's not down there, is we ought to look at, let's just throw out the number of $2 million. What would it add to the annual expenses? And
So, and then if you pass that on, what would that mean as far as additional tax burden? Would we have to raise 2 mills or,
Well, and that would probably come out of the enterprise fund, wouldn't it? Or no?
Or is that a different fund?
Well, we would have to either create a new or modify one. Another thing that we could look at, and I've had limited involvement in this over the years, it's very simple in its definition, but the mechanics can be complex, is if we were to try to do what's called some TIF funding, which stands for tax and incremental financing. Basically what you do is you go out and you borrow money, and the collateralization is the increased taxes that you're gonna see once the project is done. Meaning that you've got raw land that's generating hardly any taxes, but by you putting in the infrastructure, the sewer, or the road, everything being put in, and now you've got brick and mortar, condominiums, houses, commercial, that's bringing in that revenue, that's your guarantee that you're gonna pay that debt off. There are entities that do that and can help. I don't know, Mr. Hood, if Jerry can do that or not. Again, it's, by definition, the concept's simple, but the mechanics can be very complex. Again, that just kind of goes back to what I said earlier, there's several ways you could do this. It's just probably, I guess the caveat's gonna be, do we, almost like the road that we did, we had to finally just make a decision, it's gonna be up to us to get it done. If we decide to move forward with this, either with or without Mayoral, these are gonna be the options we're gonna have to pursue.
Yeah, so I think we got two things going on here, right? One is probably gotta do it before these big septic systems fail,
More,
regardless of Mayoral.
yeah.
Second thing is, if we do that, we have some upside, critical mass, on getting some more housing and condos potentially built up here, and some other convenience type commercial.
but did you, when you talked to Merrill, any desire to sell some of this land?
He committed,
He did say he'd be willing to settle it piecemeal.
piecemeal, he did.
Now, I don't know if that included what he calls his core property.
Yeah, I don't think it does, which is where the lodge is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's his-
And the ski slope,
Yeah,
I
that's
don't
his
think that's
core
his
piece
core
of
piece.
property. yeah.
But all the other properties, he said, yeah, he'd sell it to anybody or any developer.
Which he may do anyway, if, depending on what his feasibility study comes back and say.
well, I don't think the
Making
developer,
those-
excuse me,
Go ahead, Tim.
I don't think any developer would buy land, that didn't have sewer, knowing full well whatever they did.
That's basically what I was gonna say.
Well, a lot of his land, we couldn't get the sewer to it, I don't think. He's got 600 acres.
Isn't it most of all that land up above going up, where the fire pit is and all that?
Well, he has a big,
Behind
the core would be from the old lodge, the end of it actually where Alex Mountain crowns at Wildbird, that's the very end of his core piece right there. And then he has a large piece of overlook back on the other side of the pavilion, the post office, he has a fairly large
Yeah, where
piece
the old
there.
par 3 course was.
And then he has a fairly large, substantial piece of land down Evergreen.
Well, the other piece he's got there is that hill along Fairway 1 to the right of it.
Cannon Hill,
Yeah.
yeah. Mhm.
Well, all of that would flow, that would
That would flow.
That would flow.
That would flow and the stuff off Evergreen property.
Yeah.
I wanna say he has at least 50, 60 acres down Evergreen.
Well,
Because we had to get an easement from him to the road.
There's definitely some upside for him. I mean, what he does from a commercial standpoint and, all of that, the hotel, the conveniences, those are props to sell, to give the, because he's not gonna operate those things. And, because it's the real estate piece that, you know, the housing piece
Well, I
that.
can't take
Well, and the other pieces are gonna be far more saleable if they have sewer.
That's right.
I can't tell you how many citizens, honest to God, walked up to me and we talked, and I said, what would you like to see? And they said, you build modern condos with garages, I'll hand you a check today. I mean, they're ready, they can hardly wait.
Okay, well, you know, the desire's here, people,
It's
they
here.
wanna be here.
Yeah.
Again, you know, there are several ways that we can recoup the cost. I think it's just, as Tim said, the D word, tap fees, and developers, they'll love to pay tap fees if they can, as long as they can get what they want. And that would be one way we could recoup. It's gonna be more than $1,000. Our water tap fee is $2,500.
What's the Raven County tap-on fee
I
now?
don't know.
I think it's expensive, it's like 2,000 something?
Clayton is, I think, 3.
Is it 3,000?
Do you know, Martin, he reports that monthly, but I haven't seen,
No,
I
I
have to go
haven't.
back and see if I've got a little monthly report.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure I got it in the reports, but I haven't.
Somebody told me it was really high.
But if you know, I was just talking about a tap fee for a consolidated unit where you weren't having to run 36 individual taps, you really were just gonna tap on per building, whatever, 6 buildings, it's about,
Something like that.
And then you have just one tap?
no, they each have their own septic system,
Oh, for each building,
yeah,
okay,
so you would tie into that.
yeah.
I
You
think,
know, and Valley View's kind of low, so I'm assuming they would have to have some sort of a lift station.
no, it'll flow.
Really?
Because they got enough elevation, you don't need a whole lot of elevation.
It'll flow down to the
Yeah.
lodges, yeah.
Okay.
That's why the old lodge area was chosen to be the collection point, because it's kind of the lowest accessible area.
All right, so,
And again, it's gonna, you know, Merrill's gonna have to sell us the land to put the,
yeah,
or donate it.
Or donate it.
well,
Collection.
we're gonna commit to doing it.
Mhm.
Yes, we can probably convince him to.
I think
do that.
we could,
That'd
yeah.
be a small piece he could donate.
Call
and
it
benefit
action.
him.
Right. Okay, so, at the end of the day, I guess, what we're saying and I'm hearing is, even if we set aside Harrison development for a moment, we probably need to proceed on this just for the long-term viability of this city.
And in all
Is that
honesty,
correct?
correct, and in all honesty, we're not sure how much longer the timeshare business model is going to continue. And there's a really good possibility that they will sell their buildings to developers or individuals, so, which,
Which would drive them to have to
exactly,
do something.
Exactly.
And if there's no septic, if the septic system is not good, they're not gonna be able to sell it. The worst thing that could happen is that just sits there.
exactly, and how horrible would that be? I think their contract with RCI is over in 2025. They had a 50-year contract. So at that point, all the owners, the 42 million zillion owners of timeshare, have to vote whether they want to remain in a timeshare type business. And from what I understand from the guy who's in charge over there, they did a preliminary vote on several of the units, and most of the people do not want to remain timeshare. So it's coming.
Okay.
And as a city, we have to worry about that too, because we don't want all these buildings,
Yeah.
empty
Well,
buildings
buildings.
sitting there. Yeah, that won't help us a whole lot,
Yeah.
no matter how good our marketing is.
And then one of these bothers me, okay, so we build a sewer, then we're gonna have to pass an ordinance that requires any tap on by all those kind of people,
Yep.
right?
Yep, that's the way I understand it.
Yeah,
And
Well, yes.
communities all over this country have had to do the same thing.
Yeah,
To be on every set of water orders, we have sewer orders, yeah.
yeah.
yeah, I mean, when we talk about the long-term viability, we talked about this before. You know, unless we get to a critical mass from the tax base, and that would require some more development, what will happen, and maybe sooner than later, could be midterm, not even long-term, the costs of providing the city services and maintaining infrastructure are going to quickly rise above the tax base. And you kind of get to a ceiling of how much you can tax everything. And the viability of the city, that business model is not sustainable long-term, that's for sure. Your costs will continue to go up, and they're really accelerating right now with this inflation. And, you know, we've accomplished what we really wanted to do, was capitalize and drive up property values over the last few years, which has happened, which luckily, because of that, we were able to reduce the millage rate
Significantly.
by 2.6 points. And so that's all good news, but, you know, like Tim said, you know, from a viability standpoint, we almost have to do something to be able to expand our tax base. Otherwise, we're gonna get to a point sometime in the future where we're not gonna be able to offer all the city services that we
Well,
currently
not only
have.
that, but, you know, we're gonna have a ghost town. People are gonna, you know, who's gonna wanna come here when we have all these empty buildings and sewer problems? Who's gonna wanna stay here?
So I have five next steps, put
Okay.
it in minutes here. You know, one is some more information from the health department about septic and what we can and can't do. We need to tighten up the cost estimate on the sewer system. Right, we need to get that exact, you know, in the ballpark for sure.
You mean redo the engineering study, is that what you're talking?
Or have them update the cost for that,
Okay,
because I don't think anything's really changed on that.
since 2017? I don't know.
The
concept
prices
hasn't
have,
changed.
but the concept has.
Gotcha, I'm with you, okay.
And he might could give us a ballpark estimate,
Okay.
I'll get out to him, I'm gonna do that.
Third action step is.
And I think, just a minute, I think we ought to offer to pay him something to do it, because when I asked him before, he really didn't want to get involved in it, so.
That seems fair, right?
EMI is very busy.
Make that motion, Tim.
Definitely.
Make the motion, Tim.
The motion that we pay EMI a reasonable fee to update the costs of the sewer
Provide.
system as designed.
Right.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?
Okay.
Motion
Did you
carried.
get all that, Monty? Good for you.
Third step, what alternatives to the sewer are there out there, if any, that would kind of meet our needs and save us some money? Some exploratory there.
Who would do that?
Jason, do you have a resource for that?
To,
What other alternatives are out there, like self-contained units, like that company that came and spoke to us?
I think I mean, there are companies like that, like you said, Tim, that there's getting the approval from the appropriate agencies to do this when there's capacity, we may be, I'm not saying I won't do it, I'm saying we may be, that's probably gonna be the same end result answer we get.
But I think,
But-
I think from our standpoint.
Alternatives would be without.
Come up, just at least come up with whatever's out there, right? Because you mentioned.
Single family, acre
Well,
lot.
I'm just wondering about
is
deep
the
injection
alternative.
wells. you know,
Deep
rather-
injection
Rather than
wells.
sprinkling the golf course.
Well, how was this guy going to dispose of the water after it was treated?
Well, it was purified.
It was a self-contained packaging plant, basically, you separated the solids from the liquids, then the liquids were, the effluent was hauled off and the water was treated to essentially where it's gray water that would just be
So you couldn't pump it back into Mud Creek?
No,
No.
the notion would be that it would be for irrigation purposes.
It also was expandable, you didn't have to put it all in at the same time, it was totally expandable.
Understand, when I'm talking about deep wells, that water's still purified before it's injected. So, you know, it's not like.
Now,
it's
someone
pumping
told me
raw
that
sewage.
Julep Farms is on a self-contained system, do you know? That's what I was told anyway.
Although the city of Dillard has a sewer system, they tapped into that.
They're pretty close to that plant.
Okay.
I couldn't see that Steve Mason needs any more water on his golf course than we got 77 inches last year.
Well, they were talking about making another 18 holes, so they may need it. Okay.
All right. Fourth step was kind of looking at or considering other funding, right? We'd already talked about tie-ins, loans, you might want to just see what might be available there. And then the amortization of that, and what would that add to our monthly and annual
Okay.
burden? That was it.
Anybody else have anything else they want to say?
Well, nothing said anything about Mayoral, and we would just be proceeding, like, we don't care what you do. Is that the way we do it?
No, I'm gonna talk to Mayoral. When I talked to him last week, told him I'm gonna have this meeting, and then I will get back with him next week. So we're expecting to have a conversation there.
And know, kind of get an idea of what he's thinking, his planner has come up with, yeah.
And when we talk to Jerry Hood, we need to get him to give us a number of what it would cost to connect that ostensibly Rankin County would take on and running the pipe from the city limits down to the treatment plant.
Did the original estimate give us phases? You know, the plant would be this much and,
Yes.
you know, running it to this point would be this much and so forth?
Lineal feet, size of pipe.
Okay, good.
There is also some people along Kelly's Creek, because by that time, the mains get down to Kelly's Creek, they're gonna be flowing gravity, and people could tie into them. But like those of us that live on a ridgepole, we couldn't tie in because it's a forced main. You'd have to shoot back to your house, so.
You'd be flooding Valley View.
That may not be a bad thing. Don't write that down. You didn't hear.
Oh, you're on tape.
You're on tape, that's right.
All right. Anything else? Comments?
Y'all think the Rankin County Water and Sewer can give us any more hints or suggestions, or,
I can approach it.
yeah, our rep can go talk to him?
My experience is that they're so focused on getting more water to the city of Clayton and taking over the city of Clayton's water system that Brendan probably has not thought about it.
No,
Sewage.
All right, we expect posters, you to take posters with you, if you need somebody to stand outside the door.
You should go down there, tell them that you're an observer.
I could do that,
They
I'm sure they,
They'd
he's
start having
around.
to do don't have, that's kind of a male bastion other than D. Daly, the rest of them are all males, so they need somebody to show them how it works.
Okay, I'd be glad to. I don't know that that'd be helpful or not.
Your reputation precedes you.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
I move we adjourn, is that what we're waiting on?
No, he didn't ask for that yet.
Do I have a movement to adjourn?
Echo.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Yeah.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion carried. Thank you very much for your time.
Did we accomplish anything?
Is that?
Yeah.
Mark, can you turn off the camera?